What if I told you the man who played one of Woodstock's most electrifying sets was deliberately cut from the film? His label paid him a $600,000 package, then watched him nearly die on stage a decade later. An albino kid from Texas who learned the blues in a kitchen, 3 Grammy-winning albums with his hero, a career that ended where it began, on the road, guitar in hand. This is the rise and fall of Johnny Winter. Beaumont, Texas, 1950s. The Gulf Coast heat pressed down on everything like a heavy hand. And in this corner of the American South, being different wasn't just uncomfortable, it could be dangerous. John Dawson Winter was different from the day he was born. Albinism, extreme nearsightedness, white hair, pink eyes. In a deeply segregated town where conformity was survival, young Johnny stood out in a way that had nothing to do with talent and everything to do with biology. He was an outsider before he ever picked up an instrument. But here's what the bullies and the small-minded couldn't understand. Being an outsider was exactly what made a great blues musician. His father, John Winter Jr., was a cotton broker who played saxophone, guitar, and sang in barbershop quartets. Music wasn't foreign in the Winter household. It was the native language. Johnny started on clarinet at 5, moved to ukulele, and by age 11 had found the instrument that would define his life, the guitar. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. The family's African-American maid became an unlikely guide. In the kitchen, away from the world outside, she and young Johnny would listen to the radio together, blues pouring out of the speaker, while the rest of Beaumont went about its proper, segregated business. What he heard in those blues records reached directly into him. Pain that didn't apologize, emotion that didn't explain itself, truth told through 6 strings. He started sneaking into black clubs in Beaumont and Houston to watch the masters work. B.B. King, Muddy Waters, the raw electric delta sound that white radio wouldn't touch. Johnny absorbed all of it with the hunger of someone who finally understood what he was supposed to do with his life. By his mid-teens, he had already cut his first single, School Day Blues, released on a Houston label with his band Johnny and the Jammers. While most teenagers were listening to Elvis, Johnny Winter was already making his own history. The decisive moment came in 1962. A 17-year-old Johnny talked his way onto the stage during a B.B. King show in Beaumont. King was wary at first. What did this pale kid know about the blues? Then Johnny played. King's skepticism evaporated instantly. The validation was total. Here was a white boy from East Texas who didn't just appreciate the blues, he lived inside it. By 1968, Johnny Winter had become a legend in Texas. Houston knew him. Austin knew him. The Gulf Coast Club circuit had been his classroom and his proving ground for over a decade. But outside of Texas, he was invisible. That changed with a single article. Rolling Stone magazine sent writers to investigate the Texas music underground. What they found stopped them cold. They described Winter as the hottest item outside of Janis Joplin, a skinny albino guitarist with a blistering ferocity that had no peer anywhere on the national stage. That description lit a fuse. Manager Steve Paul, who ran the influential New York club called The Scene, read the article and recognized something the rest of the industry hadn't seen yet. He flew to Texas, signed Winter, and brought him to New York. The plan was simple: get him in front of the right people. In December 1968, blues legend Mike Bloomfield invited Winter to perform a guest spot at a concert at the Fillmore East. Bloomfield and Al Kooper were headlining. Johnny Winter was a surprise addition. Nobody in that New York audience knew what was coming. He played B.B. King's It's My Own Fault. By the time the last note faded, representatives from his label were reportedly in a panic. Not because the performance was bad, because they had just witnessed something they desperately needed to own, and they weren't the only ones who knew it. What followed was an unprecedented bidding war. Multiple major labels, all fighting over a Texas guitar slinger nobody outside of the South had heard of 2 months earlier. Columbia won. The price was $600,000. In 1968 dollars, that was the equivalent of over $5 million today. It was widely reported as the largest advance ever given to a new artist, surpassing even the hefty deal paid for Led Zeppelin. The music industry was telling the world, this man matters. The legal chaos that followed almost derailed everything. One label claimed they held a prior contract, purchased from a Houston producer named Roy Ames. Winter fought back fiercely, insisting Ames had failed to meet his contractual obligations. This Cold War between multiple record giants played out in lawyers' offices, while Johnny stayed focused on what he had always focused on, the music. His self-titled debut arrived in May 1969, 12 tracks of raw electric blues power, a sound that owed everything to his heroes and yet sounded like nothing else on American radio. The album reached number 24 on the Billboard charts, remarkable for a debut rooted purely in the blues tradition. The Texas kid wasn't playing bars anymore, he was playing history. In the summer of 1969, everything converged. Johnny Winter was a rising star, writing one of the most talked about debut albums in recent memory, and the world was about to gather in a muddy field in upstate New York to witness something that would define a generation. Woodstock, August 1969, 500,000 people. The defining cultural event of the era, Hendrix, Joplin, Santana, The Who, and on the final night, sliding into the midnight hour, Johnny Winter. For 65 minutes, he delivered a masterclass in high-energy blues rock that many of the hundreds of thousands of people there would later call one of the most electrifying performances of the entire festival. His brother Edgar joined him on stage, adding keyboards and saxophone to the assault. The set closed with a furious version of Chuck Berry's Johnny Be Good that left the crowd standing and screaming. Here's the painful irony. You've probably never seen it. Manager Steve Paul declined to allow Winter's performance in the Woodstock film or on the original soundtrack album. The decision, driven by contractual disagreements, and, as Winter later recalled, filmmakers saying his act was too strange, erased him from rock's most mythic visual record. For decades, his Woodstock legacy survived only in the memories of those who were actually there. The momentum carried straight into the next phase. Later, in 1969, Winter released Second Winter, recorded in Nashville and utterly unlike anything the recording industry had seen before. It was a three-sided LP, 3 sides of music, with the fourth side left deliberately blank. All Winter refused to fill it with filler tracks, just to satisfy format expectations. The music was complete. The fourth side would remain silent. That was his artistic statement, and he wasn't interested in arguing about it. During this period, Winter was also romantically linked with Janis Joplin, 2 Texas outsiders who had found each other in New York at the peak of their respective powers. Their collaboration reached a high point when he joined Joplin on stage at Madison Square Garden, a performance that stood as one of the monuments to the blues rock explosion of the late 1960s. Guitar magazines were running out of superlatives. FM radio had adopted him completely. The concert halls were full. Everywhere you looked, Johnny Winter was being crowned as the guitar hero of the next generation. A mantle built by Clapton, expanded by Hendrix, and now being inherited by a white-haired kid from Beaumont, who had started his musical education in a kitchen with the radio on. The contract had made him rich. The road was about to nearly destroy him. The fall of Johnny Winter didn't arrive with a single dramatic crash. It seeped in slowly, the way all the most devastating things do. In 1970, searching for a harder rock sound, Winter formed a new band, Johnny Winter and. The lineup included guitarist Rick Derringer and former members of the McCoys. They were tight, powerful, and pointed in a new direction. The band produced iconic tracks. Derringer's Rock and Roll, Hoochie Coo became one of their signatures, a hard-driving anthem that captured the raw momentum of early 1970s rock. But the road was doing its damage. The touring schedule was relentless. The parties were constant. And in the ecosystem of the early 1970s rock world, where heroin wasn't just available, but practically ambient, Johnny Winter started using. What began as recreation became dependency. What became dependency nearly became a death sentence. By 1971, the people closest to him were dying. Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, 2 of the brightest lights of the era, both gone before 30, both gone from the same darkness that was now pulling at Johnny. The losses were a mirror he couldn't look away from. In 1971, Johnny Winter checked himself into River Oaks Hospital in New Orleans to kick his heroin habit cold turkey. There was no celebrity rehabilitation system in 1971. No carefully managed detox with spa amenities and media handlers. Cold turkey meant exactly what it said. 3 months of physical horror, followed by another 3 months of psychological torment. He later described it simply as horrible. He came out the other side. Barely, but he came out. In 1973, he released Still Alive and Well, a deliberate, defiant message to everyone who had already written his obituary. Produced by Rick Derringer, the album was a critical success. It proved the fire wasn't completely gone. But the music industry had moved on. Glam rock was ascending. Radio was being reshaped by polished production values and stadium ambition. The raw, uncompromising blues that had made Johnny Winter a $600,000 investment in 1968 was now commercially inconvenient. And while Johnny stayed clean of heroin, he found other shadows to inhabit. Alcohol, prescription medications for the anxiety and depression that had always lived beneath the surface. The substitutions were quieter, more socially acceptable, and in some ways more insidious, because nobody panicked when the guitar hero had a drink. What came next would define the rest of his life in ways nobody anticipated. The late 1970s could have been the end of the story. Instead, they became one of its most remarkable chapters. Johnny Winter didn't use his survival to chase commercial redemption. He used it to pay a debt he felt he owed to the music that had saved him. His idol, Muddy Waters, the man whose records had come out of that kitchen radio in Beaumont, whose style had shaped everything Johnny had ever played, was in serious trouble. His longtime label had steered him into experimental, more modern projects that diluted his authentic power, and by the mid-1970s, he was off the label and creatively adrift. One of the greatest blues artists who had ever lived was being ignored by the industry he had helped build. Winter stepped in. He brought Waters to a new label and assumed the role of producer with a radical vision. Strip everything back. No commercial experiments. No attempts to modernize. Return Waters to the raw, visceral sound of his early 1950s recordings. One room, full band, minimal separation, maximum soul. In 1977, they released Hard Again. The album was recorded live in the studio, with everyone playing simultaneously, the mix deliberately raw and immediate, echoing the feel of Muddy's earlier work. When record plant engineers questioned the lack of stereo separation, Winter reportedly told them to whip it out and press exactly what they heard. No compromise, no concession to modern taste. Hard Again won the Grammy Award for Best Ethnic or Traditional Blues Recording. It was widely regarded as one of the greatest blues albums ever made, a reputation that only grew with time. You could actually hear Winter on some of the tracks, erupting in audible screaming in the background. Pure excitement, pure joy, at the privilege of being in that room with his hero. He followed with 2 more Grammy-winning albums for Waters, I'm Ready in 1978, and the 1979 live album, Muddy Mississippi Waters. 3 Grammys for Muddy Waters, with Winter as producer and guitarist on each. For Winter, those sessions were therapy, redemption, and love, expressed through the only language he had ever fully trusted. But while his artistic credibility was being restored, his physical condition was deteriorating in ways that wouldn't fully surface for another decade. By the late 1990s, Winter had fallen under the influence of a manager named Teddy Slatus, a relationship those close to him described as parasitic. Slatus was dealing with his own substance abuse problems and continued pushing Winter onto the road when he was physically incapable of performing at the level he had once set. Winter was being prescribed 5 Klonopin a day, a dose that left him, by multiple accounts, in a near vegetative state between sets. Concert reviews from 2001 read like dispatches from a medical emergency. Incredibly frail, using a cane just to reach the stage. Playing every show seated on a stool, hunched over his guitar. His legendary speed was now a shadow of what it once had been. He was still fighting, but he was barely standing. The final turning point came in 1999, when a young guitarist named Paul Nelson entered Johnny Winter's life. Nelson had been hired as a session musician. What he found when he arrived was not a guitar legend in command of his powers. It was a man being quietly destroyed by the people who were supposed to be protecting him. Nelson recognized the medical mismanagement. He recognized the financial exploitation. And when manager Teddy Slatus entered rehab in 2003, Nelson stepped into the void. He helped Winter find a doctor who could properly manage his prescription medications. He helped him taper off the Klonopin. He helped him get sober. When Slatus died in 2005, Nelson took full control of Winter's career and health with one mission: give this man back to himself. The results were extraordinary. A late career resurgence that nobody had predicted, and every blues fan was grateful for. Winter began touring successfully again, recording, present in a way he hadn't been in years. In 2014, he released Step Back, which went on to win the Grammy Award for Best Blues Album. It was the career capstone that proved something essential: the fire never went out. It had been buried under prescription drugs and broken management, and the grinding toll of a life lived at full volume. But the fire never went out. His influence on American music ran deeper than most people recognized at the time. The trail he blazed from Texas to the Fillmore East in 1968 and 1969 didn't just launch his own career. It created the conditions for everything that followed. Stevie Ray Vaughan, who grew up in the same Texas blues tradition, cited Winter as foundational. The Fabulous Thunderbirds, the entire Texas blues revival of the 1980s. These things didn't happen in a vacuum. They happened because Johnny Winter had already proved that raw, uncompromising American blues could fill arenas and shake the foundations of the music industry. And his work with Muddy Waters ensured that the man who had unknowingly shaped a white kid's entire musical destiny in a Beaumont kitchen received his rightful recognition and financial stability in his final years. Johnny Winter died on July 16, 2014, in a hotel room outside Zurich, Switzerland, while on a European tour. He was 70 years old. He was still touring, still playing every night. He died with his guitar in reach. He didn't become a statistic. He became a testament. Johnny Winter's story is the blues itself: explosive, reckless, painful, and defiant. He never chased trends. He never compromised the music that claimed him in a Beaumont kitchen with the radio on. The money came and went. The heroin nearly killed him. The industry moved on. But Johnny kept playing. That's the only thing that ever truly mattered. What's your memory of Johnny Winter? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from rock's golden era.